I'm going to be somewhat in the minority here because I didn't think that Deadpool and Wolverine was the greatest film since Endgame. Infinity War was a better film anyway. So I might as well come out swinging with an even more unpopular opinion. I don't know how many people have said this publicly, actually. I don't give a shit about Todd Phillips' Joker films. He's hijacking Batman IP to make Taxi Driver 2 and Les Miserables do Gotham. I probably didn't say that right. Yo, fine scouts and intrepid internet travelers. Welcome to my channel. I'm Josh, your Binge Buffoon, if you will have me. Today, I'm going to be reviewing Deadpool and Wolverine, or Deadpool Does Wolverine, because the bromance is strong in this one. That fight scene in the trash Honda Odyssey might as well have been a sex scene, especially with all the like come hither stuff. That was the point, though. To do right by this film, I'm only going to be sporadically self-serious and as self-aware as possible. I'll start by saying that I had the biggest smile on my face when Deadpool desecrated Logan's corpse and then beat the TVA. Well, I guess he stabbed. I guess the adamantium bones sort of acted like throwing knives, even though they didn't have an edge. That was my friend's only issue with the film, that an adamantium femur wouldn't puncture their bodies like that. It's more of a blunt instrument. Anyway, all of that set to NSYNC's Bye 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 and him doing the choreography. It's one of the best opening sequences in MCU history. I'm a millennial, and that had me soaking wet. All of the musical choices in this film fricked. Fucked. I don't know why I said that, because it's more profitable to say fricked. And the way the music in this film is used is very much in line with previous Ryan Reynolds, Shawn Levy team-ups like Free Guy, Gone But Forgotten Pop, not unlike Gone But Forgotten Superheroes, framing the film's most notable moments, which I've shamelessly rewatched via leaks, people recording in the theaters and then posting those videos on YouTube. Sure, you've done the same. I also love that joke later on where Paradox calls out Deadpool on desecrating Logan's corpse. And then Deadpool responds, "What are you, the internet?" Because that's exactly what I was thinking when he did that there's going to be people that have problems with this. But let's recap the plot and give this review some structure. I think this film's setup is exactly what it should have been. Hey, I don't know how to be a hero. Deadpool has to save his universe from being erased. Or timeline. Universe. It's the perfect meta story with plenty of opportunity for heart under the character's contractual circumstances. At the beginning of Deadpool and Wolverine, I don't know how to be a hero and need purpose so that I can win back my girlfriend Deadpool, aka Wade Wilson, is told that his universe is about to be destroyed because its anchor being Logan Wolverine died at the end of Logan, which actually takes place in a future that looks nothing like Deadpool's world, but let's just ignore that. I kind of also don't know why we're introducing convoluted MCU terms like anchor being at this point, although I don't think that's going to come back around in any meaningful way, so I'm just going to ignore it. Anyway, Deadpool goes universe hopping looking for a new Wolverine to be his universe's anchor being, which wouldn't work anyway, but he picks the worst one before they both get thrown in the budget-friendly void, where a bunch of awesome cameos and fight scenes happen. Even though they might have spent a bit too much time in the void, and I think the film drags a little bit because of its setting. I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine succeeds because of Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds. That's a no-brainer. I love them as these characters. Everyone loves them as these characters. It's why it's the title of the film, among other even more obvious reasons. What I think is most impressive about this film is that Hugh Jackman makes the audience acclimatize to this new Wolverine by injecting everything or exuding everything we've come to love about his previous iteration, or iterations depending upon how you look at those Fox films. And he works really well as a straight man to Ryan Reynolds' character. I think the central relationship between the two works, even if it sort of gets lost in the shuffle that is this film. That is to say that this film's irreverence and fan service often, in my opinion, gets in the way of its emotional beats. For example, since I already mentioned the Honda Odyssey fornicating, there's a moment in that trash vehicle, which actually, to be honest, those things run forever. But there's a moment where Wolverine calls out the mouth for... Actually, you know what? I don't know jack about Honda Odysseys, but Honda itself, those typically run forever, and Toyotas. I have a Camry. with 230,000 miles. Sometimes it sounds a little weird, but it's still moving. Anyway, there's a moment where Wolverine calls out the mouth for being a mouth in the car, or SUV, hatchback. The fuck does this thing look like again? It's a minivan. Jesus. Anyway, he calls out the mouth for being a mouth in the most brutal way. And instead of truly stewing in that or allowing for it to develop the characters, the fight scene ensues. And don't get me wrong, that fight scene was very entertaining. All of the fight scenes are very entertaining. This film has some of the best Wolverine rage monster action I've seen so far. Deadpool and Wolverine delivered on all the violence, gags, and fan service that you could possibly want. From a comics accurate short Wolverine, and that one that was basically Christ, we're going in another direction. He's just molded on the X. To Calvary, which does feel right. I'm really rooting for Henry Cavill. He deserves... Sorry, someone's walking around out there. He really deserves the best in this world, in this life. Oh, and the Chris Evans Captain America fake-out turned Johnny Storm cameo, which was one of the film's best overall jokes, as it comes back around in the post-credits scene. Blade was in this. To be honest, I've only seen Blade once, like 2 decades ago, and I barely remember it. But I'm aware of the character in those films' place in pop culture's lexicon. Elektra, X-23, Channing Tatum's Gambit, which at first I thought was a bit silly, but it really grew on me as a version of the character that we never got to see, which is probably a good thing. And the film sort of acknowledges that in a hilarious and surprisingly endearing way. I did like how it tried to be this love letter to a bygone era of superhero films and a farewell. The montage of behind-the-scenes footage that act as the mid-credits scene was very moving, actually. I didn't see that coming, and it caught me off guard. I thought a lot of the jokes in this film landed. I also thought a lot of them didn't. I really do appreciate the MCU making fun of itself at this low point while pushing the R rating. I'd talk about that more, but I do kind of feel like we expected that, more or less. I will say this about the comedy. In my opinion, the first 2 Deadpool films felt relatively effortless, and this one vaguely gave off the vibe that it was trying too hard. I couldn't shake the feeling that this film felt the pressure of delivering, which makes sense. Its obsession with fan service doesn't make it unlike other MCU films that people heavily criticize, where they rely on your knowledge and reverence or irreverence for these characters and their cinematic histories in order for the film to work. And from that perspective, it does work. But I do think once you strip away the novelty of it all, Deadpool and Wolverine operates with a pretty thin, predictable plot and cliche villain whose motivations change depending upon what the plot requires. That's not to say that Emma Corrin didn't do a good job with what she had to work with, but everything with Cassandra Nova is just pretty convenient and I think only exists to move the plot forward. She's very much a Fox villain, and that could be okay depending upon how you look at it. But she never really feels like a real threat. And maybe that's why the film's stakes, while multiverse ending, we're told that, don't feel as dire as they probably should, like at all. In the first film, Wade Wilson is just trying to be hot again. And I was more invested in that storyline and him coming to terms with how Vanessa will accept him as he is, or realizing that it's not about being a pretty face, than whatever his arc is in this. It's kind of vague. Yeah, what? So he needs to be an Avenger. He wants to be an Avenger. And at the end, I suppose he makes it not about himself. And that's why he tells Vanessa, I did this for you. Sure. And with Wolverine, this Wolverine, the worst Wolverine, I suppose it's just about showing up when he's needed. And together they have a very Guardians moment where they're able to survive because they did it together. All very nice. I just have to acknowledge and be honest about the fact that I left the theater feeling slightly disappointed. And I think that's ultimately because this film somewhat shafted its story. The first thing I said to my buddy who I went to see this with when I left the theater was, you know, if the movie has to remind an audience why a moment is emotional via flashbacks, multiple flashbacks for 2 separate characters to explain their motives during the film's climax, maybe the story and character arcs need a little work. Because nothing comes off more contrived than however long that montage of flashbacks was near the end of the film. I watched a video of RDJ, Robert Downey Jr.'s appearance at Comic-Con, where he was revealed to be playing Doctor Doom in Avengers Doomsday. It's the kind of news you see and immediately you think is fake, because it's so ridiculous. And a comment on that video said something along the lines of, Marvel's throwing everything at the screen just to see what sticks. That's sort of how I feel about Deadpool and Wolverine. I did have a lot of fun with it. I'm going to keep reiterating that just because I'm afraid of the internet. Also, I'm afraid that down the road my opinion's just going to change, which is very possible because I think now that my expectations are gone, it'll be much easier to enjoy this film. The fight scene with Wolverine and his cowl, even though CGI Wolverine looked kind of weird, in the bus set to Like a Prayer, it was super cool. It was super cool. The problem with an excess of gags, cameos, fight scenes, and cool stuff is it takes time away from the story beats, which can make the film less coherent and less impactful. And that's why I stand by how I feel like Deadpool and Wolverine's emotional moments came off a bit contrived. It was sort of like we're doing the emotional thing right now. And maybe that would have been more acceptable if Deadpool straight up looked at the camera and said, we're doing the emotional thing right now. But when a film expects you to take a moment seriously and it hasn't necessarily been earned, that's contrived. That said, I found the worst Wolverine's explanation as to why he's the worst a bit underwhelming. He was just getting drunk and wasn't there when the X-Men were killed. And then he killed a bunch of innocent people in an act of vengeance or rage. Beyond that, his world seemed pretty normal. You'd think he wouldn't be able to just drink in a bar if human beings were at war with or exterminating mutants. It'd be like Days of Future Past, which was my favorite X-Men movie, by the way. I read a theory before seeing this film, theorizing that this Wolverine might have been the one Wolverine that couldn't kill Jean in the third X-Men film, which would have resulted in his world being devastated. I think that would have been a lot more interesting to me. You could have even made Phoenix the villain in this film. I think that would have made his arc and story a lot more emotional and impactful as the ending of the Fox franchise, because that's sort of what this is. Outside of cameos and gags, there's really nothing surprising about the plot of this film. As I talked about in my reaction to the first trailer, I never expected this film to save the MCU or introduce a new big bad or set up future films. And this film knows it isn't or wasn't going to do that. That's sort of the whole point of the Marvel Jesus gag. It's just trying to be its own thing. And that's all I wanted, was for it to be good in its own right, to do right by its characters, and not come off as too gimmicky. It does right by its characters because Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds crush it once again. And to relate back to what I was saying about some of its emotional beats feeling a bit contrived, when the main character breaks the fourth wall constantly, gimmicky can be excused, I guess. It could have balanced the tone a little bit better. But when I expressed some of my issues with this film to my buddy, he said, if you go into a Deadpool movie expecting anything other than simply a good time, then you're fooling yourself, or something like that. And that's fair. I guess there's just a part of me that wanted and expected this film, and this is why I mentioned the moment in the Honda Odyssey where Wolverine calls out Wade Wilson's mouth as this defense mechanism. We could have addressed that a lot more. That's how you raise the stakes in a movie where the central character makes everything a joke. What happens when he can't make jokes anymore? That's when everyone stops and goes. Because I felt that in that moment where he just said, I'm going to fight you now. Because he had nothing to say. And when you show me a bunch of emotional flashbacks, I'm just like, I don't know. That bothered me. But it's okay and I'll probably get over it. Deadpool and Wolverine, it didn't feel like an epic MCU phase ender or beginner or character study. It felt like a Deadpool comic. Or in a very weird and intentional way, maybe, a Fox film. Fully equipped with plot holes and contrivances and a cliche villain injected with MCU nitrous oxide. It was all very cool. And the rule of cool, the rule of cool excuses a lot of entertainment these days. Maybe there's an element here now where we assume everything's going to be crap, so we're a lot harder on the good stuff. Or the blockbusters that are just a good time. But that statement is, of course, also at odds with how our expectations have been lowered. Cinematically, on television, narratively. Am I being a nice pool because I'm afraid of the internet? I don't know, maybe. The nice pool stuff wasn't as funny to me at first than it really was. I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't go see this film again. Why do I keep adjusting my hat? And when you look at yourself in the OBS, you're always doing things the opposite way you mean them to do them. In recent news, bringing back RDJ as a Tony Stark variant turned Doctor Doom, or just Victor Von Doom, whatever they're doing there, is definitely an act of desperation aimed at revigorating interest in the MCU. Quote the man himself, new mask, same task. However, like Deadpool and Wolverine, it might just be self-aware and outrageous enough to work. Robert Downey Jr. may very well be Marvel Jesus. And that's all I have for this one. Big love to everyone who was bored enough to join me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drive me off this platform if you must. Otherwise, like, subscribe, dislike for cathartic reasons. Drink water, stay young, and remember, don't be an idiot, be a buffoon. Peace.